Are you a thoughtful leader? Maybe you are. Maybe you think you are. Let's find out. I'm Mindy Gibbins-Klein. I'm author of The Thoughtful Leader and host of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Thoughtful leadership is all about thought leadership that goes above and beyond. Thought leadership that is truly new and original, exciting, disruptive, maybe even groundbreaking. Because let's face it, we need to raise the bar. My guests and I are absolutely obsessed with finding truly original thought leadership, and I'm going to bring you so many exciting ideas and opportunities, things for you to think about, and chances for you to push your thinking that you'll be very glad you tuned in. So thanks so much for checking out Thoughtful Leadership and the Thoughtful Leader podcast. I look forward to connecting with you very, very soon. Welcome to the show. My guest today is the amazing thoughtful leader, Steve Sanders. You can read his bio, you can read the show notes, but I'd like Steve to tell us a little bit about himself. Hey, Steve.
Hello, Mindy, and thanks for inviting me. So a little bit about me. At present, I'm working in company value building and helping organizations pivot to change what they need to do things differently for the next growth inflection point or the next sort of funding event or exit strategy, in order to maximize the outcome for themselves. Background, most recently, one of the big four management consultancies, a long IT industry legacy, much longer than I'd like to admit. But yeah, a number of large turnarounds and growth projects in different IT companies and client organizations.
So I'm wondering, and I think our listeners will be wondering, if this isn't a bit out of reach for most companies. The stuff that you're talking about, it sounds like, reasonably big companies, very ambitious entrepreneurs, scaling and exiting and all that stuff. Does this apply to all business owners or in fact all business people?
I believe it does. I mean, everybody has an outcome that they want to achieve. And it boils down to being a very personal discussion with yourself. Sometimes the outcome is just to form a future that's more lucrative or more balanced and in harmony with your lifestyle. And normally it may not, but it should take into account all of the people that are with you on that journey. And this is where we start getting onto the thoughtful leadership, because I'm a deep believer in the future of stakeholder capitalism. And I believe that we are in the middle of a grand shift towards, or a great shift towards the less sort of profit first, profit last focus, and more awareness of the impact of our businesses and our activities on all of the people around us and all the people in our value chain and supply chain. And with that in mind, I think it affects everybody, because everybody has suppliers, everybody has customers, and a lot of us have employees or teammates. And to create a future that's the future you want, whether that's exiting your company or just making it a better place to be, the same thought processes apply.
So that being thoughtful about your people and, the impact on everything and not just being focused on profit, that is a very big idea. We do hear people spouting off about things like that, people first and people versus profit and all those other people initiatives. But do you think that this is really possible? Because obviously businesses need to be profitable also. So I guess I'm asking, what are the secrets to achieving this?
God, you mustn't put me in the 5 secrets of the frame of mind. Then I panic and run away. I mean, a lot of people start thinking that it's black and white. You're either all profit or you're some sort of charity. And I don't think that the two are exclusively correct. My absolute focus is on making money. Right. And my absolute focus is on my clients making money. And that's the measure, right? This is why businesses exist. It's why they were formed as limited companies in 1855. This journey that we've been on over 170 years, however, has seen the exaggeration of that singular goal to make profit. And it's provided people with a safety zone where they can ignore their conscience if it's in the purpose of making more profit for the shareholders. And when people object, should I be spending a little bit of my profit margin on making sure that members of my suppliers' families are not starving? My answer is, well, of course you should. At a human level, you should. But even at a competitive markets analysis level, increasingly you have to. So it's not about sacrificing profits in order to do what's right by the world around you and those people that are connected to you. It's about making more profits because you are doing the right thing. So doing the right thing over the next 10 years will become an enabler to increasing profits. Not just an enabler, but I think it's going to become a prevention of company bankruptcy. That's my personal, rather extremist speculation, but I think, that's very real.
Okay, so I think you need to explain to us how that happens, because how is it an enabler? Maybe you can paint a scenario, either a client you've worked with or just a hypothetical situation where that really would pay off in financial and legacy terms.
So first of all, we got to examine the reasons why companies fail. And companies don't fail because of downturns in the economy, recession. Companies, historically, there has been no correlation between the two. The pattern doesn't exist. Company failure happens when there's a disruption in your competitive environment, a technology-based or business model-based disruption, and firms fail to adapt and adopt. And those who fail to adapt and adopt, and this is through all industries and over 100 years, 120 years of history, it's a proven pattern. So those who do adapt and adopt to those disruptions tend to succeed. Those who lead the way and they build broad brick walls behind them, their competitors run into those brick walls. So this is an important baseline understanding. So if you understand that, then look at the way that the buying criteria of markets are changing. And the buying criteria of markets are changing to become more principles-led, more purpose-led, more based around beliefs, values. And that's also been proven by research. In fact, my generation, your generation, the X-Gen, are firmly in the lead. That's over 72, 73, 74% of X-Gen will change their product suppliers based on finding a company that matches their principles more clearly. It diminishes a little bit when it gets to the younger generations, but still it's more than 55% of Generation Y and Z will change. That's echoed in choice of employer as well. So getting the best people and getting the best customers will increasingly become based on whether you reflect appropriate values and principles. Now, your existing competitors might not care about that. If you suddenly start to care about it and show it, it creates a competitive advantage for you in the changing buying criteria and employment criteria of the marketplace. So it's not a business model disruption, nor is it a feature-based disruption, but it's kind of a tone of buying criteria disruption. And if you choose to be the leader that takes that and says, and I'll give you an example, says this is something I stand by, and this is something that is truly, it has to be real, right? And you have to therefore be inclusive of the people in your company and inclusive of the people in your ecosystem to find out actually what do you really reflect, because don't greenwash, honestly. People see it from a mile away. So what do you really stand for? What do you really embody in the values that you represent in the world? And if people click with that, they'll stay with you, right? They'll gravitate towards you. The fact that nobody's offering it at the moment doesn't mean they won't. So just as easily as you can attract loyalty that way, somebody else can, and you'll lose your rather features-based transactional kind of thing. So an example is actually a movie producer that I know from a market in Eastern Europe, a very successful guy, actually. He's done top-tier adverts and no brand names mentioned, and some of the big movies he's been involved in. And he was, I spent New Year with him, and he was confiding in me. First of all, we had a personal conversation about what he hopes for this year. And a lot of his principles and values came out, and I thought, God, you surprised me. I didn't know you were that deep. Really, I mean, that's quite attractive. He was very much into gender equality. He really, really was sensitive to the lack of cultural connection between Russian ethnic minority and the local ethnic majority in his country, and the inability that they had to collaborate well, to exchange knowledge, and sort of values like that are actually really topical and important to the people who are holding the purse strings of budgets for sponsoring these productions. That he was struggling, he said, when he was having the consultation with me, he said, I struggle to find out how to get my message across because I'm the most professional and I'm the most efficient at doing my job. I'm a brilliant producer. Everybody, look at these creds, they're fantastic. But he was failing to get the sponsorship. He was failing to get people to stay with him as his employees. Churn was terrible. we just directed his attention to his values and principles and started exploring that and saying, so do you think those things might matter to the guys in the Latvian government who are making decisions about where to put their investment? Do you think that might matter to female Latvian graduates coming into the industry? Gosh, he didn't have to go anywhere except his own values, right?
So that's very promising, because people do want to be values-led. I think people want to, lead with their purpose and kind of achieve everything that they've envisioned for themselves. And, if you can reduce the conflict in, between your company values and your personal values, then, that's better. I guess if you are the business owner or founder or even current leader of the business, then you steer the direction of that business. I guess you have done that successfully with your business, because I know you've been out on your own for a while. I say on your own, very successfully running this consultancy. But has it been a challenge? Have you encountered any challenge or made what other people call a mistake? I call it an error of judgment.
I think that I can look back at my background and see errors of judgment where I've assumed that, it was before the time that I'd seen the light where this is concerned. And I'd assumed that others in a team would kind of get the strategy that I'd formed in the background in my own mind, right? I'd proven this sort of business approach I was championing with other dynamic organizations, and really turned around magnificently and grown their business very well. And I arrived in this organization. I had a line management job, so I carried authority as well as sort of thought leadership. And I said, okay, I spent a while, I talked to a couple of people to validate the thoughts, and then I just launched this idea into a group of battle-hardened, old war horses, 35 years, tenure in the organization, that sort of thing. And there were a couple of them that just gave these weary looks around the room and killed the whole initiative. Now, this was there, first and foremost, to save their jobs. But it's amazing how when you don't include people and respect the fact that they might know more than you, even if it's about the subtleties, about the environment, the subtleties of what is acceptable, what's going to gain traction. If you don't involve those people, if you assume you know enough to have the right answers, then you're off at a losing start, because the energy that you need in order to make this succeed is a collective energy. It's not yours. There is no such thing as a great leader with a great genius in this game.
Right. So now we've tap danced around the issue. I think we're going to tackle it head on, because I'm getting a picture in my mind, and I'm sure the listeners are as well, of cultural but more generational challenges, or intergenerational. And I know that is not, a specific area of expertise for you, but those of us who are a certain age, and thank you for calling me ex-gen, I'm actually baby boomer, but we'll just leave that there. we have, we've had to get used to 2 or 3 other generations coming into our space. And I appreciate we have listeners from all over the world and all different ages. So I really couldn't say who's listening to me right now and thinking, oh, well, I'm this, I'm that. However, for anybody listening, is it a challenge dealing with people from different generations? So I imagine that the millennials and the Gen Zs or whatever, younger people have a challenge with my baby boomer values, and vice versa, I'll admit. So, how do we resolve that? What do you think, Steve?
I think, first of all, I do refer to generations frequently, because it is a good, very broad brush stroke to start to appreciate some grand trends that are happening. However, you shouldn't be over dependent on that, because I know baby boomers that are watching Sky TV every night and never think about the greater good. They just want to get the next action movie and go to bed with a whiskey. And I know baby boomers who are deeply preoccupied with the greater good of the world. And I know millennials and younger people who are completely indifferent and buying fast fashion and throwing it in the bin a week later, and others who are obsessed about going to secondhand clothes shops so that they can create the circular effect around their lifestyles. And it is an individual thing, right? How are you going to know about individual choices and preferences? Is by talking, listening, communicating, not talking to people with your own opinion in mind and how to get to that outcome, but talking with people around you so you can absorb and understand. So there's that age-old communication thing. And there is no such thing as a typical millennial or a typical Gen Z or a typical baby boomer. It just doesn't exist. It's a fabric. But it is helpful as one dimension. So there's tools that you can use, clever tools. I did a brilliant one recently, one of these indexing tools where I could understand my own personality type, my own lens on the world. But even that, isn't entirely necessary if you can do it by just hearing a person out, giving them a sense that you're really interested, you have a sense of curiosity about what they think. And I found that has really strengthened, Dale Carnegie said that the individual has this deep urge, it's a human instinct, it's a deeply held urge to be valued, to be appreciated. It's probably close to hunger and thirst. So if you're listening to a person and really showing curiosity into what they think, you're really ticking numerous boxes. You're likely to get to a better solution, a better outcome. So I think that there is this. There are trends, and I like to pay attention to that because it is something that is really big that's happening, and it's also because we're looking at it from a lens, as we always do. As humans, we create boxes that are very easy for us to relate to. They describe the world that we live in at the moment. They describe all of the assumptions that we take for granted. And it makes it easier for our customers to relate to how they should make decisions. It makes it easier for us to relate to how to explain what we do. But when you're looking at the future, of course, if you look back, when has everything and anything ever stayed the same? But we look at the future somehow as there's certain things that we can predictably rely on are going to stay the same because they won't. And when somebody comes along like me, and okay, my bottom line is don't do anything unless you're sure it's going to be beneficial, of course. This is just one of the thought processes that feeds into your structured use of strategic methodology and frameworks that you should be using to determine what your lens is on the future, right? This is just another thread of information. However, it's one of these biggies. It's like if you ignored the internet in 1998, you would be in trouble, right? And this is a biggie. This is a step change moment. And I'm suggesting that it is underpinned by generational shift. It's underpinned by socioeconomic changes in our supply chain markets. It's underpinned by various different dynamics, regulatory changes that are happening that will soon force people, you, me, to demonstrate our accountability in different ways. So all of these things are coalescing at a moment, which I feel pretty safe in making these bold statements. Yeah, I'm pretty safe, backed up by a lot of good people doing much better research than I've done. So I think that yes, the generational shift, they do show a propensity to decide differently. They decide who to work for differently, and they decide what to buy differently. And that you've got to pay attention to, right? That's fundamental.
And we are all part of this shift. So thank you very much for the reminder. And I'm glad you used the word assumption again, because you used the word assume in the story that you told about the team. And I think that the assumption and curiosity, which you're suggesting is the answer, probably are in conflict, because if you want to make assumptions, you're not staying open and curious. And if you become curious, I guess you might find that some or all of your assumptions will dissolve. This is challenging for many people, I think, who are used to being persuasive, selling others on their ideas. They are so certain and so confident that they would rather bulldoze everyone else. And so what are your thoughts on that? Not just persuasive salespeople, but anybody who is having a communication about business or anything important.
I would again revert to the human, because it's just all a human interaction, really. I have a nephew who is a super intelligent, my son as well, good grief. Both of them very clever, very forthright with their opinions, as you can imagine, and at a certain age, it lends itself to knowing all the answers in the world, of course. And they sometimes show themselves as being contrarians. So you might have a position and they contradict you. Oh, okay, I'll try and compromise, and here's my position. And then they contradict that as well. So it's sort of this contrarianism, and it can be quite annoying. And depending on how you look at that and how you perceive the process of being contradicted, it can either be a real pain, a real thorn in your side, or it can be an asset that you go out looking for it. And the same thing can be said for nonconformism. You can perceive nonconformism as being quite ridiculous, frankly. Look at that person marrying outside of a social group, or look at that person doing something extraordinarily silly with this thingy called the internet. Silly person. Everybody needs shops, don't they? You can look at that nonconformism from a very judgmental and dismissive way, or you can look for it and get excited about it, and that's entirely your choice. I'd argue that it's not always helpful to be getting contradiction happening constantly, because you can stall someone, i.e. you, the leader. You need to make a choice at some point and say, look, this is now our norm. And thank you for the contrarianism. Thank you for the nonconformity. Right, that was brilliant. Got it. Now this is our norm. Now let's go get it. And then you energize people, and you get people, you find those who are trying to deplete your new norm. You find those who are trying to build it, and you get the correct coalescence of forces and move it forward. But you've always got to keep your ear open as well, even when you've got that new norm, and ask for people to contradict it again. Well, why not? I mean, you're the only person that can get frustrated about this, and think of what you could be missing. You could be missing the next twist, right? The next source of differentiation, right? So the only time that it really becomes a problem is if you get upset by it, or totally distracted and you let it run wild. Or you ignore it. That's when it's problematic, because when you ignore it, you could be ignoring the future. So I'd say that it is about not getting carried away with everybody arguing and thrashing it out, but this democratic environment. If you look at democracy, people do debate, right? Proper democracy. They are empowered to challenge and debate and be contrarian. But then when you make a decision, you just go do it, right? Yeah, and that, I think, is what the role of the leader is to change their personal perception of contrarianism and nonconformism away from being contrarians or obstinate and opposing force towards contrarians being people who think outside of the norm, right? You make choices that might be different, and that's okay. Think of nonconformists not to being silly, but people who might open up new ways of looking at reality, right? And if you do that, then they become your friends. Then your process of choices improves, in my point of view. It's a good way of thinking about inclusiveness.
I love what you've just said. I wish we had another whole session. Who knows, we might get you back on the show, because that last thing that you said, the process of choices, I think will become the title for this episode, because we're always looking for those magic phrases, and I don't have to provide them all myself, because our guests have so much wisdom. So it just remains for me to thank Mr. Steve Sanders for his wisdom and insights, and for bringing a different perspective, which is what it's all about in this day and age of thoughtful leadership, and especially on the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Hope you're enjoying listening, everyone. And please do subscribe and make sure that you catch all the new episodes and listen back to the archives. But thank you so much, Steve, for being a total star on this week's episode.
Thank you, Mindy. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Thoughtful Leader, and I hope it's inspired you to be more thoughtful as a leader in your business. Please consider subscribing and leaving a review. An important question for you. Do you want to create a culture of thought leadership in your organization? My best-selling book, The Thoughtful Leader, is available now on Amazon and many other sites in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. Please visit www.mindygk.com for more great content. That's www.mindygk.com. Speak to you again soon.